The movie opens with an astronaut named Spencer spending a romantic night in bed with his wife Jillian before his space mission the next day. Spencer and his friend Alex were two very competent and renowned astronauts at NASA who were being sent to space as part of a regular mission. Although Jillian has full trust in her husband's skills, she couldn't help but worry about something going wrong. When she voices her worries to her husband, he assures her that he'll be okay. I mean, come on, he's Johnny Depp, of course he's gonna be okay. And he also tells her that he'll call to check in on her from space. Apparently they can do that now. And Spencer manages to calm Jillian down, and even though she knows he might not be able to fulfill his promise, she feels better about the mission. The next day, Spencer leaves for the base while Jillian goes to school where she works as an elementary school teacher. She looks out of her classroom window and watches in awe as her husband's spacecraft is successfully launched into space. With the launch a success, Jillian is able to relax. And this is when one of her staff tells her that there's a call for her, and when she answers the phone, it turns out to be Spencer. He had called right before the spacecraft left Earth's orbit, and a few days later, Jillian was having lunch with her sister Nan, who tells her that she had gotten very lucky to end up with a man like Spencer. As the two of them continue talking about how well Spencer treats her, Jillian notices her husband's picture on the TV. Immediately, alarm bells start ringing for her and she starts changing channels to see if she can find more information about him, and at the same time her doorbell rings, and when she answers the door, she finds a NASA agent named Sherman Reese outside. He tells her that she needs to accompany him to the NASA head office, and just then, Nan calls Jillian and tells her that she's found something about Spencer on the news. Jillian ignores Reese and rushes back to the living room where she hears a news anchor talking about the mission. The anchor announces that NASA had lost communications with the spacecraft and that they had no confirmation of whether everyone was okay or not. Jillian turns to Reese and asks him if her husband was alive or not, but he replies that he doesn't have answers for her and that she needs to come with him where Alex's wife Natalie was waiting as well. Jillian finally agrees and accompanies Reese to the NASA base where she meets Natalie, and the two of them hug each other in support, and when Natalie starts crying, she tells Jillian that she thinks their husbands are dead. However, Jillian reminds her that they need to remain positive. Just then, NASA's director joins them and reveals that their husbands have gone out of their spacecraft to fix a satellite, but an explosion had caused them to lose communication for 2 minutes. The two women were shocked to hear this and anticipate the worst, but he assures them that comms have been restored and that their husbands are on their way back. They then spend the next few hours watching footage of their husbands making it into Earth's orbit before landing at the base. Sometime later, Spencer and Alex are taken to the medical center so they can be examined, and the doctor informs Jillian that her husband is completely okay and will wake up in a few days, but because Natalie's husband was much older, his heart has suffered a strain as a result of the explosion. Jillian spends the next few days by her husband's side, waiting for him to regain consciousness. Eventually, Spencer wakes up and calls out for his wife, who immediately starts kissing him, relieved to have her husband back healthy and alive. On the other hand, Natalie watches as Alex is kept under surveillance by doctors to see if his heart is okay. But suddenly, he wakes up and starts calling out for Spencer and repeatedly asks Spencer, "What is it?" before screaming and convulsing and losing consciousness. Natalie starts banging on the window, separating her from her husband, catching the attention of nurses and doctors nearby, who immediately jump to help Alex. They hold him down before injecting him with medication to calm him down, and at that moment, Alex regains consciousness and looks at Spencer, who would join Natalie through the one-sided mirror, and she smiles eerily. Several days later, both of the astronauts are released from the hospital and are taken to a ceremony held by the President of the United States of America. There, Natalie approaches Jillian and asks her if Spencer had talked about what happened to them during the 2 minutes that communications was lost, and when she doesn't respond, Natalie figures out that he has not talked just like her husband, which makes her worried. The president thanks the astronauts for their duty and heroic action before awarding them with medals for their bravery. After the ceremony, Spencer tells Jillian that he's decided to resign from his job, and instead he's been offered a new job in an executive position. The only catch though is that the job is in New York, so they'll have to relocate. Although Jillian was hesitant about moving and making such a big change all of a sudden, she agrees when she sees how excited her husband is. Alex. She promises to support him no matter what, and further away from them, Reese watches the two of them interact. Right before Jillian and Spencer leave for New York, their family and friends throw a farewell party for them, and during the party, Jillian notices Alex and Natalie having a heated argument before he forcibly kisses her. Just as Natalie pushes her husband away, he starts coughing and blood starts pouring out of his mouth and eyes, and he then collapses, and before help can get to him, he dies there instantly. Alex's strange death makes it on national news, leading to NASA holding a press conference to address his death. When a reporter questions if whether his death came as a result of the accident in space, they respond that several medical tests were performed on him to ensure that he was healthy, and this is why it was unlikely that Spencer will suffer the same fate. And a few days later, Spencer and Jillian go to Natalie's house to attend Alex's funeral service. They're greeted by Nan, who tells Jillian that Natalie had been asking to see her, and when Natalie hears Jillian enter her room, she claims that Alex used to talk to the radio, but she could never understand what was being said. Jillian thinks that Natalie is in shock, which is why nothing that she says makes sense, and as she gets up to leave, Natalie claims that he's still inside of her, and Jillian doesn't question this and just leaves the room, convinced that her friend is kind of losing her mind. A few minutes later, everyone hears a scream coming from Natalie's room, and Jillian rushes to the room and finds that Natalie has electrocuted herself to death. Weeks after Natalie's death, Spencer and Jillian manage to move to New York, where Jillian attends work events with her husband. While Spencer talks about spacecrafts, Jillian tries to talk to other women there, but as soon as they find out that she's actually teaching kindergarten kids, they begin to ignore her. And seeing Jillian standing alone against so many people, a woman named Shelley joins her and they start to talk. After some time, Spencer, who had been excitedly showing around new designs of a spacecraft to potential investors, joins his wife on the balcony. Jillian builds up the nerve to ask Spencer what happened in those 2 minutes that they lost communication with Control Center, and instead of answering her question, Spencer chooses to distract her by kissing her and then initiating sex. However, she soon finds that Spencer is being too aggressive and tries to stop him, but he was too drunk to notice his wife calling out to him. Natalie falls asleep after that, and when she gets up at night, she finds that Spencer is not in the bed next to her. She goes outside and finds Spencer listening to the radio. When she asks him what he's doing, he tells her that he's only listening to music, and one morning, she joins her new job at her new elementary school, where she begins to feel a little sick. She goes into the toilet and takes a pregnancy test, which comes out to be positive, and shocked at her discovery, she decides not to tell Spencer about it immediately. That night, the two of them were invited to Shelley's house for dinner, and since her husband was Spencer's new boss, they end up going. Throughout the night, Jillian watched as her husband, who'd previously only been interested in flying aircrafts, was now excitedly having a conversation about different models of spacecrafts. She chose to stay quiet, and once Shelley and her husband were called by their butler, who informs them that his mother was feeling unwell, Spencer turns toward Jillian and asks her why she was quiet all night. This is when she finally tells him that she's pregnant, and to her surprise, Spencer is overjoyed and hugs Jillian before telling her how happy he is about the pregnancy. The next morning, he takes her to an obstetrician where they have their first scan. And there, Jillian gets an even bigger surprise when the doctor tells her that she's actually expecting twins. After her scan, she meets up with the doctor alone and reveals that she used to suffer from mental illness and would often hallucinate. And she was worried that her pregnancy and her hormonal changes might cause a relapse in her condition. However, her doctor reassures her that she'll be fine, especially because she has such a caring husband looking after her. Once they all get back home, Jillian and Spencer fall asleep, but she has a nightmare from the night that she had found Natalie electrocuted to death, and this time she finds that she was the one who was electrocuted to death instead of Natalie. This scares her and causes her to wake up in the middle of the night, and as usual, Spencer was by her side and comforts her by telling her that it was only a nightmare. And then he takes her to the bathroom and gives her a bath to help relax her. Overwhelmed by her husband's love and care, she tells Spencer that she wants their babies to be just like him, and he replies that he would like their babies to be as beautiful as Jillian, and that one day they'll be pilots just like him. With her pregnancy progressing, Jillian decides to go baby shopping, and in the middle of her shopping, she notices Reese inside, carrying a huge briefcase and looking really paranoid.
She approaches him and greets him, and when Reese notices her, he looks around for Spencer, but when he finds him missing, he tells Jillian that he needs to talk to her about her husband and what really happened to him the night of the accident. Jillian assumes that he would want to talk to Spencer as well, and tells him that he's at work at the moment and that they could talk once he gets back. However, Reese insists that he only wants to talk to her, and explains that the two men, Alex and Spencer, had started to act strange after they came back, and he knows what happened to them. Starting to panic a little, Jillian asks Reese if he's representing NASA, but he informs her that he's been fired after he tried to tell them about his theory. At this point, Jillian decides that she needs to leave, but Reese insists on following her so she could hear him out, and when she refuses to stop and give him time, he confesses that Natalie had been 6 weeks pregnant at the time of her death. When she hears this, Jillian stops in her tracks and turns to Reese once again, and he gives her a tape recorder and asks her to play the tape to find real answers to what really happened to her husband. He tells her that all the astronauts have been given extensive training about what to do in case of an explosion. However, in the recording, they can hear both men screaming in terror as if they saw something that really scared them. Before he leaves, he asks Jillian to think about what Spencer was really like before the accident and if he's the same man that he was before the mission. When Jillian gets home, she listens to the recording but can only hear Alex and Spencer screaming. For her, the tape proves nothing and she ends up destroying it, choosing to believe that Reese is just crazy. Shortly after this, Nan arrives at Jillian's house and she's overjoyed to see her sister again. She tells her sister about her fears and what Reese had told her, and Nan, who idolizes her relationship with Spencer, assures her that there's no truth behind what Reese was saying. Jillian wakes up the next day feeling as confused as ever, and even though she had destroyed the tape, she still could not forget about it. This was why she decided to give Reese a call, and she asks him about Natalie's autopsy, which revealed some information about her baby. He tells her that Natalie was also pregnant with twins before her death, and then he asks her to meet up with him so he can give her more details. The two of them decide on a place to meet up, and the next day she takes the subway to meet up with him, but just as she was climbing up the stairs after her subway ride, she notices Reese standing with Spencer. She immediately hides and watches as Spencer insists on having coffee with him, and when Spencer refuses to take no for an answer, Reese manages to leave his bag behind for Jillian to take before he follows Spencer. As they leave, Jillian grabs the bag and rushes home, and then she calls Nan over and expresses her anger at her for telling Spencer about her meeting with Reese, and Nan insists that she didn't really tell Spencer about anything, but Jillian doesn't trust her since she was the only person who knew about the meeting. This causes an argument between the two sisters, and Nan angrily leaves their apartment, and after this, Jillian tries contacting Reese, but her calls don't go through. And so, she calls the hotel that he was staying in, but she was unable to find him. With her paranoia kicking in, Jillian rushes to open the bag Reese had left for her, and inside, she finds a key that leads her to a storage locker, and when she gets there, she opens the locker and she finds it filled with pictures and files related to the incident. Then she notices a tape with her name attached to it, and she picks it up and was even about to leave when the lights go outside. Jillian starts to panic, but soon the lights come back on, and she manages to find her way back home. As soon as she gets home, she plays the video in which Reese had recorded himself talking, and he claims that he'd gone over tapes of the mission, and although he found nothing strange immediately, upon further investigation, he found that the recordings from Spencer and Alex's time outside the craft had another voice talking. The voice was unintelligible, but it proved that there was a third entity with them, one that scared the men so much that they screamed. He claims that if Jillian was watching the tape, that meant that she's most likely dead, and in the 2 minutes that communications were out, the alien entity had managed to get inside the two astronauts. He even reveals that the real Alex and Spencer are dead, and that the husband that she is with right now is actually an alien entity. Everything starts to make sense for Jillian, since she had noticed several changes in her husband, but she'd brushed them off as the personality changed after the traumatic accident. Just before the tape ends, Reese tells Jillian that she is now carrying 2 alien babies. All of a sudden, Spencer walks into the room, and Jillian immediately shuts off the TV. Luckily, Spencer doesn't realize what she was watching, and tells her that he knows that she had a fight with Nan, and wants to make her feel better. And this is why he brought a movie that they could watch together, and Spencer bends down to insert the movie's VHS tape, and when he removes the one that Jillian was watching, he asks her what she was watching, and she tells him that it was only a video about pregnancy and babies. Interested, Spencer tells her that they can watch it together, but she somehow manages to convince him to watch the movie that he brought. The two of them then watch the movie and end up falling asleep, and that night, she dreams of the time that her husband was in space and the explosion happened. When she wakes up from her nightmare, Spencer seemed to already know what she was dreaming about, and she wonders if they are now sharing dreams, but Spencer assures her that he could only feel her distress. Now skeptical about her pregnancy, Gillian decides to visit Shelley, her only friend in New York City. She tells her that she no longer wants to be pregnant, and Shelley doesn't ask too many questions and just hands her a few abortion pills. Gillian returns home and tries to take the pills, but her babies make her feel guilty for even thinking about getting rid of them. At the last moment, she decides against taking the pills because she felt guilty about killing babies, human or not. Suddenly, Spencer shows up behind her and asks her what she's doing, and this seems to confuse Gillian, and she wonders how Spencer knew what she was doing. He informs her that the babies are him and that they've communicated with him about her intentions. Gillian then tries to run away, but Spencer was faster and stronger than her and catches her, and Gillian then starts running away from him, but no matter where she goes, the babies always communicate with Spencer, giving away her position. Spencer corners Gillian near the stairs and asks the babies to assault her, and they cause her a lot of pain, because of which she falls down the stairs and loses consciousness. A few hours later, Gillian wakes up to find herself at the hospital, and he whispers in her ear that the babies are still inside her and that they're okay. However, if she tries to do something stupid, like take abortion pills again, he will tell everyone that she's crazy, and given her mental history, they will believe him. Out of fear of being locked up, Gillian decides to stay quiet, and during this time, Nan shows up at the hospital to meet her sister, and they end up apologizing and reconciling. Gillian then tells Nan everything, but she thinks that her sister has hit her head a little too hard and chooses not to believe her. Later that night, Nan returns to Gillian's house, where she finds Spencer trying to hide Reese's bag. And this is when Nan gets a little suspicious and decides to confront Spencer, but back at the hospital, Gillian gets a vision that Spencer has killed Nan, and she jolts awake but is revealed to find that it was only a nightmare. Despite it only being a nightmare, she felt paranoid and decided to leave the hospital in search of her sister. She then gets home and enters the room that she thought Nan was killed in, but finds nothing there. Gillian then decides that she wants to kill the babies and turns on all the faucets throughout their apartment before grabbing the radio. By the time Spencer returns to their apartment, he finds Gillian sitting in the middle of a puddle of water with the radio in her hand. She threatens to electrocute herself to death along with the twins if he comes any closer. He tries to talk to her out of it and reaches out to grab her, and this is when she notices bruises on his hands and realizes that they're the same one in her vision when he was killing Nan. She then asks him about her sister, but when he doesn't respond, she begins to cry, and finally, Spencer tells her the truth about his identity and reveals that he's killed Spencer and taken over his body, and that the babies inside Gillian are also aliens just like him. Then he uses telepathy to drag Gillian's chair toward him, but before he can grab her, water flows from the second floor onto Spencer, giving Gillian the chance to throw the radio at him and connect the plug. This electrocutes Spencer, and the alien gets out of his body and suddenly enters Gillian's body. And a few years later, the twins grow up, and Gillian is now married to another pilot, and the movie ends with the alien still inside Gillian, intending to take over the human population by making more alien babies.